Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I want to make a full breakdown of this new look Milwaukee Bucks team, now featuring none other than Damian Lillard. Still 2 days later, I cannot believe that trade actually happened, but it did. We have Dame over there in Milwaukee, alongside Giannis, alongside Chris Middleton, alongside Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis. It's exciting. I cannot wait to watch this team play, and I've just continuously thought about what they're going to look like on the court, so I had to make this full video breaking down exactly why I'm so excited and why this team is going to be so terrifying for the rest of the league. I made an initial reactions video a couple of days ago when the trade first happened, talking about the Bucks perspective a little bit, also some about the Suns and the Blazers, so if you want to hear my initial thoughts, you can go check that out. I'll probably make some longer videos talking about the Blazers when the Jrue Holiday trade actually happens, looking at what their young assets look like now and what their future trajectory is, and I'll probably make one too talking about this new look Suns team now that I've thought about them for longer, and of course with the addition of Yusuf Nurkic, Nasir Little, Grayson Allen, pieces like that, probably before the season starts, so be on the lookout for those videos. But yeah, today it's all about the Bucks. And when I think about this trade, one thing I want to note before we get into the team is just how monumental it is. This has a chance to be one of the most important trades in modern NBA history by a long shot, maybe even in the entirety of NBA history itself. That might sound a bit exaggerated, but let me explain exactly what I'm thinking. So obviously, this includes Milwaukee trading for a top 75 player of all time in Damian Lillard, who's currently right around that top 10 range. I would say he probably is a top 10 player, and he's never been on a true championship contender before, and this is a contender that he vastly improves in my opinion. So not only is he giving himself an actual chance now to win a championship, but he helps the Bucks improve in their chances, and I think a ring would do a lot for Dame's legacy, for Giannis too, as Giannis is trying to push into that top 15, top 10-ish player of all time conversation by the end of his career, and Dame is trying to put himself amongst the top point guards in NBA history. So that in and of itself, if they get some championships, 1, 2, maybe even more, is big for both their legacies, but also in the process of getting Damian Lillard here in Milwaukee, while not just making themselves better championship contenders, they've also helped themselves keep Giannis here, maybe making him a Buck for life. If you hadn't been paying attention over the summer, which I know the offseason was boring, so I wouldn't have blamed you, Giannis was continuously hinting at leaving Milwaukee. This wasn't in a single interview or a couple of interviews. Every single time they sat Giannis down with a microphone or just on some kind of interview and said, hey, what does your future look like? He basically said, I want to be a Bucks lifer. I love it in Milwaukee. This will always be my home. But I've got to prioritize winning. That is my goal in my NBA career. I want to win more titles. I got a taste of one. I need more rings. So if that has to be somewhere outside of Milwaukee, that's what I'm going to do. And that makes a lot of sense, especially because before this trade, the Bucks looked like they were screwed. I made a full video talking about Giannis hinting at maybe leaving and exactly why that could be the case. I think around a month ago, maybe it was a few weeks ago. Of course, everything drastically changes now, but the Bucks were in trouble. Giannis, Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, Jrue were all free agents coming up pretty soon within the next couple of years. Bobby Portis wasn't too far from free agency. Pretty much the entire roster was going to be expiring within the next couple of years, so the future was unclear, and it was made even worse, the situation, by the fact that they just wasted one of their last best chances at winning a title in a wide open Eastern Conference where they were the #1 overall seed by losing in the first round in embarrassing fashion to the Miami Heat, becoming one of the only 1 seeds to ever have that happen to them. It looked like the Bucks were a crumbling disaster, but then this Dame trade changes everything. Again, like they did with Giannis after they lost to the Heat last time, actually. He was saying, or he didn't say anything in specific, but the media was saying that Giannis could end up leaving. He hadn't signed an extension, and so the Bucks traded for Jrue Holiday, and immediately Giannis signed that long-term deal. Now, I don't know if he's going to do that again this summer, because next summer he can get a lot more money, so I anticipate he'll wait till then, but I think they have secured Giannis in the long term with this deal, showing him again that, hey, we're going to make whatever moves necessary to keep this team competitive around you. And it's not just competitive. They got him a superstar, a top 75 player of all time in Damian Lillard, who just had probably his best individual season ever. But it's not just keeping Giannis in Milwaukee that drastically changes the title picture for the next few years, but it also prevents Giannis from going somewhere else, making another team a championship contender. Say a team like the Chicago Bulls, who Giannis had hinted at some point, hey, I might like to play in Chicago at some point. I'm not saying he was going going to go there or he was assuredly going to leave the Bucks if this deal didn't happen, but it was way more likely at that point, and now I don't think it's going to happen at all. So obviously on a grander scale than just the Bucks, this move matters. It changes how the league is going to look over the next few years and the possible trajectories of a number of different teams that we could have seen going into these upcoming years if Giannis was potentially available. But instead, Giannis is going to stay a Buck, I believe, alongside Damian Lillard, and this team is going to be really good. Let's talk about specifically what I'm excited about with the Bucks. Now, I've seen a lot of people saying that this is an overhyped move, that it doesn't matter that much, that Dame is not going to change things for the Bucks. They're not really a championship contender, this or that. I couldn't disagree more. I think this move drastically changes what they're going to look like and ultimately makes them far better than they would have been going into this upcoming season otherwise. To me, Dame is a perfect fit for the Milwaukee Bucks, and he fixes a lot of issues that we saw from them last season. Now, defensively, the Bucks were great last year. They finished 4th in defensive rating in the league, led by guys like Brook Lopez, who finished top 3 in Defensive Player of the Year voting, Giannis Antetokounmpo, who has consistently been one of the league's best defenders, of course, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, and of course, Jrue Holiday, who has been one of the league's best perimeter defenders for most of his career. But offensively, they weren't nearly as good. They finished 12th in the NBA last year in offensive rating, which isn't terrible, and I believe a big part of that was due to time missed by a number of guys, specifically Chris Middleton, who was a big boost to them offensively, and even when he came back, he was playing sporadically throughout the regular season, coming off the bench here and there, and just didn't look like himself. He looked a lot more like himself when the playoffs rolled around, which we'll talk about later, but at least in the regular season, Chris really wasn't the usual guy that we typically see him as, so the offense fluctuated. But it wasn't just him being out that caused problems. They just had overall issues generating half-court offense, which has been a bigger issue for the Bucks than I think some people realize over the past few years. They've got Giannis, who's a consistent interior threat, can knock down shots here and there from the outside, and if you put him in transition, he's unstoppable. Jrue Holiday, who's a facilitator and has a very shaky offense, especially when it comes to the playoffs, where he's wildly inconsistent. Chris Middleton is a shot creator, but again, he's been in and out of the lineup due to injuries. They really just had no elite options in terms of isolation scoring, specifically in the half court when the game slows down in the playoffs. I've got some numbers here from my guy Alex Hoops. He dropped a full video talking about the Bucks that I highly recommend if you want more information about how their play style is going to look this upcoming season. I'll drop it in the description below if you want to go check that out. But he went ahead and found some numbers specifically relating to the isolation points per possession of some of the Bucks players last year. Giannis, for example, had a 0.84 points per possession on isolation, which isn't great. Jrue Holiday had a 0.73 points per possession. Chris Middleton was 0.89, and the team as a whole scored 0.8 points per possession in isolation last year, which was the second worst number in the NBA. So they were not scoring in isolation, which is a problem. You need guys that can get you buckets in those moments, especially in the playoffs, where the game is slowed down and the offenses are just crumbling. It's one of those ugly defensive games. Someone's got to go get you a bucket. And you know who can do that? Damian Lillard, who finished with 1.18 points per possession last year, making him the 3rd best isolation player in the entire league last season. He's going to be a big boost for this team's offense, specifically when it comes to the playoffs. And just overall, Dame is one of the league's best offensive players, and last season might have been the best year of his career. He scored a career-high 32.2 points per game on a career-high 64.5 true shooting percentage, which is just absurd, and he averaged 7.3 assists to go along with that. He is a machine. Even though he's getting up there in age, it doesn't matter because Dame's probably as good as he's ever been on that offensive end. He's going to give the Bucks a ridiculous boost offensively, individually, but even more so when you take into account how he's going to play alongside the Bucks' overall talent that's already there. Of course, when we start talking about pairings on this team, there's no other place to begin than Dame and Giannis. I mean, how could you not start there? The superstar duo that's really going to make this whole thing work. I can't think of many better superstar pairings out there off the top of my head than these two guys. Dame gives you the elite offensive play, high-level playmaking, and all-time level three-point shooting. If you want a perimeter player, Dame's your guy, one of the best perimeter shooters we have ever seen. Then you've got Giannis, who gives you an unstoppable downhill threat, interior force that can also dominate defensively, probably even more so now that he doesn't have to exert as much energy offensively because Damian Lillard is there. Not to mention the fact that a Damian Lillard-Giannis pick and roll might be the deadliest play in the entire league this upcoming season. Like, how do you stop that? You've got Dame, who's quickly attacking downhill with the ability to pull up at a moment's notice or finish at a high level, while meanwhile you have Giannis Antetokounmpo on the other side, driving to the rim, who can dunk on pretty much anybody at will. You've got to make a decision on that, or even if you stop them both, they're both good decision makers that are going to be surrounded with outside shooters like Chris Middleton, Bobby Portis, Brook Lopez, Malik Beasley out there on the three-point line. Like, even if you stop them for a moment, they're going to find a shooter who's going to have a semi-open look, and even if that doesn't work, they've still got Giannis or Dame to make something happen. There's so many different options they can go to. You put those two guys and someone else in a Spain pick and roll, like, what do you do against that duo if they're operating out of those sets? You're also going to have times where Giannis is the one handling the ball with Dame moving off ball, who if you lose for even a moment is going to light you up with a catch and shoot look. The Bucks offense has gotten so much scarier. Plus, it's going to be harder for teams to truly key in on Giannis with Dame out there, who even if you don't leave him open, is a really high level playmaker that's going to consistently get guys in spots to shoot the ball. I cannot wait to watch this team operate. I mean, just the fact that they have 2 of the 6 players who averaged 30 plus points per game this past year on the same team is ridiculous. Like, one of those 2 guys, Giannis or Dame, is going to be a 2 option on most nights. Like, that's insane. I also like that their head coach, Adrian Griffin, has said before this trade even happened that he wants his team to play fast, which is what they should be doing, especially with this duo. Giannis himself is unstoppable in transition. You put Dame out there with him. Like, how do you stop those 2 guys in a fast break? One of them can pull it from the logo with ease, and the other one is one of the greatest interior threats and downhill forces of all time. I also think the addition of Dame is going to benefit Chris Middleton a lot in particular. He dealt with injuries last year and wasn't very good in the regular season because of that. We talked about that earlier, but in the playoffs, he did get back to looking like his usual self, putting up 24 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists on pretty high level efficiency against the Heat in that first round matchup. I could see him playing at a similar high level this upcoming season, especially with opposing teams focused so heavily on trying to stop Dame and Giannis, again, 2 30-plus point per game scorers. I don't know if Chris Middleton's numbers will pop off the page in terms of points per game because those 2 guys are going to be getting a vast majority of the shots, but I think the efficiency could really level up, and it could allow Chris to get back to the high efficiency, high level play that we saw from him a couple of seasons ago when he was an all-star. With all this taken into account, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bucks were the #1 offense in the league next season. Now, there are some great offenses out there too, like the Kings, the Celtics, the Denver Nuggets, so maybe the Bucks don't reach that #1 spot, maybe they slide down a couple of spots, especially because it could take some time for this thing to gel, adding a piece as big as Damian Lillard into the fold, but I think by the end of the regular season, by the time it matters the most, this offense is going to be nearly unstoppable. But what about the defense, which is the big question mark with this team at this point? To get Damian Lillard to improve their offense so drastically, they had to trade Jrue Holiday, who's one of the best perimeter defenders, point of attack defenders at the guard position in the entire NBA. In fact, their new acquisition, Damian Lillard, was once completely claimed by him in a playoff series and called him at one point the best overall defender in the league. Now, I don't know if I'd go that far, but Jrue Holiday is amazing and was a big part of why the Bucks were so good defensively over the past few years. He is a force, and losing that point of attack defense alongside the point of attack defense of a guy like Javon Carter, who's now over in Chicago leaving in free agency, the Bucks are really going to suffer in that regard, and that could be something that comes back to bite them, especially against some of these big-time perimeter threats in the Eastern Conference. But I will say that I don't think it's enough to sink this Bucks team. The defense, yeah, I think it's going to take a hit, but the offense, I think it's going to be so drastically better that it'll be a big-time win in the long term. Plus, you've still got guys like Giannis. You've got Chris Middleton, who is a solid defender in 2022 prior to the injuries. You've got Brook Lopez, who will be operating down low. He's going to have to be tested a little bit more now, but I think he is up to the challenge as a top 2 decoy finisher last year. Ultimately, I think they'll be fine. The defense, it's going to drop a little bit, but I don't think it's going to completely fall off a cliff like some people are expecting, and it's going to be enough to hold up when the offense is so ridiculous good. I've also seen a lot of people talk about how the Bucks have no depth at this point, and yeah, it's not phenomenal, but I don't think it's completely terrible. They've still got some good players, like Bobby Portis, who's one of the best bench players in the entire league. They have Jay Crowder, who didn't play a lot last year, but hit 43% of his threes when he played. Pat Connaughton, who had a down year, but I still think he's got some good play in him. Malik Beasley, who's an up-and-down shooter, but I think he's going to be a lot more up than down this year, getting incredibly wide-open looks playing off Dame and Giannis. I expect Marjon Beauchamp to take a jump. I'm a big fan of his game. And there's also, of course, going to be now a big draw to go to Milwaukee with them poised as a championship contender. Players are going to look look at the Bucks with Damian Giannis and say, hey, that's somewhere I want to go, whether that's in the buyout market, it's a player that's looking to be dealt. When a team is looking to trade someone, the Bucks are probably going to call them up too, because this is a front office that, as you can tell by the Dame trade, is extremely aggressive in trying to compete. If they notice throughout the season that they need more depth pieces, they need better defenders, like the defense is a significant issue, I think they're going to go out there and make the necessary moves to improve this team. I would be shocked if the Bucks roster, the way it looks right now, is the same way it looks going into the playoffs, or maybe even going into the regular season. There's been rumors that a guy like Cameron Payne, who's been a solid backup guard for years at this point, could be looking to come over to the Bucks, because right now he's just hanging out as a free agent. So a pickup like him would be big. And there's going to be a number of teams by the time the deadline rolls around. They're looking to either blow it up or just trade off some pieces, get rid of some salary, or just see if they can get some draft capital back as they begin their tanking portion of the year. The Bucks are probably going to be at the front of the line for those acquisitions, and they've pretty consistently made some kind of deadline deal the last few years. I don't expect this season to be any different. And ultimately, that's a big reason why I'm not too worried about the Bucks going into the season, because I think that they're going to level up throughout the year. Additionally, while depth is definitely important, especially if you deal with injuries, you can get away with an 8-9-man rotation in the playoffs and be perfectly fine if your high-end talent is good enough. We just saw the Nuggets run an 8-man rotation, barely an 8-man rotation throughout the playoffs, and they pretty convincingly won an NBA title. The Joker, they had Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, Bruce Brown, a great role player. Like, you only need 7, 8 pretty good guys to win a championship if you have enough great talent at the top of things. I think the Bucks are in a similar situation where they have 2 top 10 guys, the second best player in the world in Giannis, and a guy in Dame who I think is right there on the fringe of top 10, a DPOY candidate, a fringe all-star in Middleton, depending on how he bounces back from injury, a great bench player in Bobby Portis, who I think could even be in some of those closing lineups if they want to go big. Like, this is a team that I think by the time the playoffs roll around, even if they don't make many drastic changes, will be just fine. Speaking of the Nuggets, this brings us to the question, where do the Bucks rank in this title contention picture? Are they the best team in the NBA now? Are they the championship favorites? Are they the favorites in the Eastern Conference with the Celtics out there? Where do they sit? If you ask me, I think right now they're probably my favorites in the Eastern Conference. I've got to think about this trade more, of course. The Celtics could still make some moves. They're rumored to be interested in a guy like Jrue Holiday. I don't think it'll happen, but it would be a really fun move in terms of building this rivalry, because I think those two teams are very clearly in their own tier in the East right now. You've got some other good teams out there like the Sixers, but the James Harden situation is all over the place. We don't even know what they're going to look like with that situation going into the season. You've got the Miami Heat, who were last year's Eastern Conference champions, but they went on a Cinderella run, and if you ask me, I think they got worse in this offseason, not by much, but they didn't do anything to drastically improve, while the Celtics and Bucks each added an all-star caliber player, with the Celtics adding Porzingis and the Bucks adding, of course, Damian Lillard. And I've been saying all summer the Celtics are my favorites in the East. I think they could win 60 games, and I still do think they can. I think they could beat the Bucks. They're the only team in the East that at the moment has a shot to do so, and that series would be incredibly fun. I think those two, again, are easily in their own tier in the Eastern Conference, and those two join the Nuggets in the top tier of championship contenders at this point, in my opinion. So yeah, I think those are my overall thoughts on this Bucks team at the moment. Let me know in the comment section down below where you think the Bucks are going to finish this season. Do you think they're title favorites, Eastern Conference favorites? Who would win in a Celtics-Bucks series? Is there a team that I'm sleeping on in the East or in the NBA as a whole that could take down this Bucks squad? I appreciate y'all watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. If you want to see me break down any other teams leading into the season, comment them down below, because we've still got a little bit less than a month now until the year begins, and I want to continue to break down some of these teams before the season actually starts. Appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.